pledge myself to a new deal for the American people.
When the election of 1932 rolled around, Roosevelt pledged to America his New Deal and how he would bring America back. The New Deal came at a time when the country needed it most. After more than a decade of prosperity in the 20s, America's economy came to a crashing halt. People went from prosperity to poverty in a blink of an eye. Americans in desperate need of change bought into the New Deal proposed by Roosevelt, and they elected him president. The New Deal promised to reach out to all the people of America and would change their lives for the better. I think America believed that even though Roosevelt was in a high political position, he still related to and felt sympathetic towards the hardworking people of America. The New Deal would prove to bring many changes for the American people over the next decade, and many acts were passed and definitely changed the way America was run. However, these acts did not fix all the problems of the common man. While one act benefited in some way, there was often downfalls that were soon to follow. The common theme seen throughout the New Deal was that, unlike under the presidencies of the 20s, government intervention in the form of legislation would provide relief, reform, and recovery to the farmer, worker, and the needy, and would pull the United States out of the Great Depression. So one of the groups that Roosevelt attempted to help was the farmers. The farmers faced tough times during the New Deal era, just as they had during most of the 1920s. During the Roaring '20s, many American farmers went into debt due to the falling farm prices and the need to purchase modern and expensive machinery. The New Deal brought forth relief and recovery initiatives designed to help the farmers, such as the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the Farm Security Administration, and the Soil Conservation Service. However, most farmers felt that Congress never really helped them achieve true reform, and that the primary focus at the time was really on banking, railroads, and manufacturing. Farmers were simple people. They were brought up to work hard, raise a family, and pay their debts. The problem is that when they worked hard and had a good product, they overproduced, and they ended up only hurting themselves in the process. One of the government solutions, as I mentioned earlier, the AAA, was a program that was designed to increase the prices of their produce by lowering the overall supply. Unfortunately, it didn't really work out as well as they'd planned. Large landowners decided what parts of the lands to stop producing, which meant that sharecroppers and tenants were out of a job. So, as you can see, government involvement increased. However, it didn't help the farmers as much as they really hoped it would have. Let me share some of the reactions the farmers had to this government intervention. As you can see by this, clearly a landowner, he says, "The trouble with us farmers is we don't get together and stick. But big business and everybody else with any sense unites for protection and profit. Not the farmer. Oh no. He's got to be bellyaching about what he's got and griping about what he ain't got. He plants a world of cotton and hollers if the government steps in and controls acreage." So you can see that he almost supports the government intervention and thinks that controlling acreage would help. But you can see that most of the farmers disagree and they don't understand what the government's trying to do. On the flip side, there was also a very negative reaction to government intervention. Another farmer says, "Many farmers tell me that all they ask is that the government will just let them alone." And yet even another farmer, this one a tenant, states that he had to even reestablish himself. It says, and thus reestablishing himself on the farm, he's doing all of his own plowing and hauling with those oxen, bringing himself to where he no longer needs nor will accept relief from any source. So obviously there's some opposition to government intervention, and you can really see that with these three examples. Carried with them a strong belief that government intervention would create jobs and strengthen workers' rights. There were several acts created for the working class. One example is that of the National Industrial Recovery Act. This act created the Public Works Administration and the National Recovery Administration. The PWA created industrial projects and thus industrial jobs such as building new buildings, roads, tunnels, and bridges. The NRA was created primarily to control competition and to protect the worker. It set minimum wages and maximum workweek hours so that companies could not try to gain a competitive advantage over another rival company. Unlike the 1920s, FDR moved power from the businesses and redirected to the workers, and also stressed federal control. He also urged workers to join unions, seeing a spike in percentage from the 1920s. It had increased from under 10% to much more in the 30s. Now, if you look at some of the documents, you can kind of get a feel of how the opinions of the union members on FDR himself. So if you look at what this man that works in the shipyard says, he says, at some of the steamship meetings, if you could be there and hear some of the men talking, you would think that Roosevelt is the damnedest fellow that ever lived. Maybe because some crow to pick with some labor union. It all depends on what is eating them. Then again, you'd think that no better man ever lived, FDR. All in all, it depends on how they stand with the labor unions. So really, it's kind of saying that depending where you were within the union, you had different opinions on FDR. Looking at this second example, you can see that this man has a positive view on the unions. He says, "You asked me what I think of the unions. Well, I think before the unions were all right if they drive the crooks out, and besides, I believe in one big union." So you can kind of see the opinions on not only the unions, but on FDR himself. The Second New Deal lasted from 1935 to 1936, and it was known as the Second 100 Days. Continued discontent within the country pushed Roosevelt to initiate action which politically moved the country left of center, where government could soften the power of big business and protect the needy. A number of initiatives were proposed during this era. The Emergency Relief Appropriation Act, the Works Progress Administration, the Social Security Act, the National Youth Administration, and many more. Looking specifically at the Works Progress Administration, it's kind of interesting to note that this could be one of the reasons why there were so many testimonies and documentation of the attitudes and people's opinions of what FDR was doing and how the New Deal impacted their lives. Many of the quotes and the testimonies, like I said, were probably a result of the Works Progress Administration. In summary, the federal government under Roosevelt and the presidency itself experienced a vast expansion in its authority, especially over the economy. Although capitalism was dominant in the 20s, and for most of the decade it was successful, FDR knew that the government had to play a bigger role in order to bring the country back to prosperity. He was able to begin to relieve, recover, and reform the country by his installation of several acts that got workers back on their feet, controlled farmers' production, and much more. The common theme throughout the New Deal is the increase in the amount of government intervention. The legacy that FDR left behind was one of mixed opinions. He took on the most difficult task of rebounding America from its worst economic downturn in history. Although he was not able to bring the economy completely back from its low point, he certainly got the ball rolling in terms of recovery. His presidency and the New Deal galvanized the base for the Democratic Party, bringing together workers, women, farmers, and minorities, the groups that had lost faith in Hoover and the Republican Party during the Great Depression. The creation of this base and the general ideas of government intervention are still found today.
Until I see my dream girl in reality. Although my caravan is merely shadows of my only guide, somehow I feel that my ideal will soon be at my side. Until we meet, just a bag of bundle beef. For love alone made a gypsy out of me.